Throughout time, roller coasters have come and gone. Only some become legends for their intensity and thrills. Each and every year, coaster fans like you venture to the parks, searching for that one special ride that stands out above the rest. You submitted your rankings, and now it's time to reveal the group of elite roller coasters that you have voted as the best of the best. COASTER-net Uncut is proud to present the 2018 Thrilling 32.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to round 3 of the 2018 Thrilling 32 Bracket Challenge. It is time for the Elite 8 tonight as we narrow down the Elite 8 to the Final 4 in this year's Thrilling 32. We go from 8 wood coasters and 8 steel coasters down to just 4 of each as we get closer and closer to finding out who this year's champion will be from both the wood and steel roller coaster rankings from the Ride Warrior Choice Awards. I am Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York, alongside the king of coasters, Andy Rabarchek from Chicago, Illinois. And Andy, I pointed this out to some folks, but if they haven't noticed, you've been wearing a nice little crown there in the background the last few episodes here, well, as you currently are right now.
I'll tell you what, when your opinion is better than everyone else's, you get the crown. So, and that's what I've been wearing here, Danny Miller. That's because, Danny, we're going to start talking about Final Fours this evening.
We're getting closer to giving away the crowns and finding out who will be wearing the crowns during the 2018 season here.
And I don't like tooting my own horn, but I guess I might as well, because on the selection show,
your luck's eventually going to run out if history is any teacher here. I mean, you're not going to be right, are you?
No, all my picks are still in. So I right now, I have a perfect Final Four on both sides of my brackets.
Yes, you do.
I gave you the winners. So we're going to see tonight if I'm actually absolutely correct. That's what I'm most excited for this evening.
You're not excited to see which coasters are moving on. You want to see if you yourself are going.
I want to see if I'm the most right.
That's right. Well, let's calm you down a little bit and talk about some wood coasters, shall we? Because you're on this high right now. I want to calm you down a little bit. So we'll talk about the wood coasters first. As always, again, we have the Elite 8 wood and the Elite 8 steel coasters here. We're going to narrow it down to the Final 4 in each. And we're going to start, as always, with the wood coasters. We're going to start in the Traver region. And the regional championship here this year for the Traver region is 2 former champions. We've got Boulder Dash from Lake Compounce going up against Voyage from Holiday World. And again, Boulder Dash, the inaugural champion, but ever since, it's been Voyage coming in a few spots higher than Boulder Dash here. Any chance that Boulder Dash, for the first time since 2012, ranks higher than Voyage been trending down, but I don't know. I still think Voyage is really, really strong here.
Well, I feel that we've talked about a lot of these coasters tonight. We've talked so much about, and I mentioned to you earlier that maybe, having great matchups in the first few rounds leads to a few less exciting matchups here. But, this one to me is a no-brainer. To me, Voyage is the superior roller coaster. Even though it's trending down slightly, it's still a top 3 ride, never not been a top 3 ride. Boulder Dash, in the top 4. But to me, I don't think Boulder Dash, in my mind, if you compare these 2 rides, there's no question. Voyage is obviously the better of the 2 rides.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you, and history has shown that even though it is, they do rank pretty closely over the history of this poll in the previous 5 years here. Voyage does tend to rank a little bit higher, and it is Voyage moving on to the Final 4 this year. So Voyage, a previous champion, just the champion once, looking to try and get that crown back for the first time since the 2014 awards, having lost to Outlaw Run and then actually El Toro last year in the semifinals before Lightning Rod took it all. So Voyage is going back to the Final 4 once again. And, I don't think that should be a big surprise here.
More so, back to the storyline of the night, one for one, Danny.
One for one over here. Now, this next one is where it can get a little bit tricky, I think, for you, because this is an opportunity. You called Mystic Timbers out of the gate. You called the new kid on the block out of the gate as the Final Four from the John Miller region. And I think you particularly I think you felt pretty confident in that, because we didn't have any previous champions in this region like we have in a lot of the others. We haven't seen an Outlaw Run. We haven't seen, a Voyage. We didn't have Lightning Rod, and that we didn't have any previous champions in this region. So I feel like that's kind of one of the big reasons why you liked Mystic Timbers so much here. So it is Mystic Timbers from Kings Island going up against Rampage from Alabama Splash Adventure. Now, as you look at the graphic here, no history for Mystic Timbers, obviously, being a new ride for 2017. But Rampage, was standing but not operating for several seasons and kind of debuted in 2015 in this poll at number 14. And then we've been talking about this, the last couple weeks here, jumping up to number 5 last year, Rampage was. And the big question coming into this matchup is, if Rampage is still a top 5 coaster, is Mystic Timbers better? Because then you've got a long history of Voyage, El Toro, Boulder Dash, and then with last year's results, Lightning Rod. Those 4 coasters really, Lightning Rod being the new coaster last year, but the other 3 have always been in that top 3 or 4. So and then Outlaw Run was always kind of in there. So it gets awfully crowded up there in the top 5 when you start throwing Rampage into the mix. And I think the question here is, does Mystic Timbers have enough to be a top 5 coaster? And in its first year, I don't know what the answer is there. I don't know if the answer is yes there.
I think we've heard a lot of crybabies crying about Wildfire dropping in the first round, whatever. I think it was interesting that Mystic Timbers went over Wildfire. Mm-hmm. I will be the first to admit that this was a tough region to pick, that Mystic Timbers is a ballsy call. You got other big rides like Ghost Rider and Prowler. Maybe not, haven't fared well in this poll in the past, though, even though I love both Ghost Rider and Prowler.
Yep.
Like you said, you have to set your feelings aside at some point. Rampage was the clear, you didn't know Wildfire, but then the next clear challenge is Rampage.
Yep.
And I just have to think that the amount of people that rode Mystic Timbers, the amount of people that love Mystic Timbers, there's a few detractors out there. I've been hearing some wild theories on social media and even the YouTube comments about Mystic Timbers being overrated. I don't understand that at all. I think it's by far one of the finest GCIs I've ever been on, with Mystic Timbers and Prowler being neck and neck. So I don't understand all these people saying that Mystic Timbers isn't a great GCI, people saying that's a boring GCI. I don't understand that at all.
I don't understand that at all either. And I wonder if, we haven't talked about this during this year's Thrilling 32 almost at all, because Mystic Timbers is such an amazing ride. But I kind of wonder if at some point, and we won't really know because we don't know why we don't set any guidelines for how to rank your rides, whether it's best ride or, your last ride, or what they're ranking based on overall ride experience, if they're considering theme and whatnot. I wonder if maybe the Shed and the fact that lots of people were disappointed by the Shed is playing into why people are saying Mystic Timbers is overrated. But I don't think the Shed should detract from what Mystic Timbers is. I quite enjoyed the Shed, and I know you did as well.
Danny, I said it on Media Day. Me and Dwayne stood there right next to the ride and said it on Media Day that I don't understand it. I don't understand the hate for the Shed.
I don't either.
Rather be sitting on a transfer track and doing nothing as they board the next train and send it out? Because that's the other option. The other option, now you can criticize how much they hyped it up, but that's their job, is to hype up stuff.
Yeah.
And it has a different gimmick. We've never seen that done on a roller coaster, on something here in the States like that, that's not really super, like we've seen super themed roller coasters at Disney and Universal and all this other stuff, but nothing like that from what could be considered a regional park. Like, this is really cool.
Yeah.
And the other option is that you sit on a transfer track in the sun. I think the one complaint might be it doesn't have air conditioning in there. I didn't get to sit there during the summer, but I don't understand how that could detract from the ride. If that's why you're ranking it lower, then you've got serious issues in your life.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think Mystic Timbers is an all-around great ride. And again, we keep going back to Wildfire in that first round. And, the farther Mystic Timbers goes, the better news that is for Wildfire in terms of the overall rankings, because that would suggest that it was very, very high.
Yeah.
But, Andy, the question was always, what's in the shed, right? Well, it's a Final Four berth for Mystic Timbers. Mystic Timbers knocks off Rampage. How about that? Mystic Timbers, what's in the shed? A spot in the Final Four and a matchup against Voyage. How about that?
That is outstanding. This was one of the toughest decisions out there. We've had, people
absolutely.
on the YouTube channel comment that they were going to make this pick. This pick has happened. You were right, my friend, and I am 2 for 2 as we sit here.
Yes, you are. And I'll tell you what, as we move on to the next region here, the Thompson region, you might as well start penciling yourself in as 3 for 3, unless we're going for a major upset here. We've got the Legend from Holiday World going up against Lightning Rod from Dollywood, and the defending champ here has been very strong thus far. And as we talked about in previous shows, really no rides have even – I don't think the first 2 rides between Raven and Balder have even really made you hesitate at this point. And I'm not sure that Legend is the ride that makes you think twice either.
No.
I think Lightning Rod, you said in the selection show, had probably the easiest path to a Final Four that this tournament has ever seen. And I can't imagine you're changing your mind on that.
No, not at all. This one, you look at the graphic here, and obviously Legend, meandering towards the middle, towards the bottom. A fine roller coaster, but never has been spoken of in terms of number 1. And that's what Lightning Rod was last year, number 1. And that's what is going to make it move on in this round quite easily. So,
yeah, it is Lightning Rod moving on to the Final Four. And again, no big surprise there to see the defending champ moving on. I mean, Lightning Rod had, even though it had so many technical issues and mechanical issues and was down for a good part of last year, and its opening year, it had a little bit better luck in 2017. But in 2016 had many, many issues, but that didn't stop it from winning. And so far, nothing has come close to stopping it this year. So Lightning Rod is moving on to the Final Four as the champion of the Thompson region this year. So as we move on to the final region here, the Schmeck region, the Herbert Schmeck region, it's appropriate that we have a Herbert Schmeck coaster in the championship for the Schmeck region. It is the Phoenix from Knobels Amusement Resort, and that is going up against El Toro from Six Flags Great Adventure, last year's runner-up. And, this one is one that I get worried about as a big Phoenix fan, and as one that is not as high on El Toro as several other people, because I really would like to see Phoenix win a matchup like this. But again, looking at the history, Phoenix has always been right there. Phoenix has always been very, very strong, on the edge of the top 5 or just outside. I just don't know that I see Phoenix leapfrogging El Toro, especially when El Toro had its strongest year ever last year, finally breaking into the top 2. And, looking at the trends here, I start to wonder and ask myself, does El Toro have what it takes? I mean, El Toro finally won a golden ticket this past year, and I start to wonder, does El Toro have what it takes to win it all this year?
Oh, I don't disagree at all. I think El Toro, if you look at the history of things, El Toro is maybe more popular now than it's ever been, especially with the golden ticket win. I think that's a huge boost to showing how enthusiasts are looking at El Toro. Phoenix, one of those rides that, usually has pretty bad luck as it comes to matchups here, finally makes it into the Elite 8. But Phoenix, I don't see it having a huge boost. I love Phoenix. Phoenix and El Toro right there on my list, right next to each other. I just don't see Phoenix overtaking El Toro, though. I think El Toro's got a huge amount of momentum, and I just don't see it happening here. I'd love to see it happen. I think it'd be great, but I realistically think El Toro has momentum on its side.
Yeah. Well, we complete this year's Final Four with the addition of El Toro from Six Flags Great Adventure, moving on to the Final Four. And Andy's 4 for 4. He's got a perfect four. Perfect 4 in the wood bracket. So we'll throw up real quick just to look at the complete Final Four here as voted by the 2017 Ride Warrior Choice Awards. We've got Voyage going up against Mystic Timbers, and we've got Lightning Rod going up against El Toro. I mean, those are, you've got 3, as we like to say here, 3 perennial favorites. The defending champion in there at Lightning Rod. We've got a past champion of Voyage, which was runner-up for many years. We've got El Toro, last year's runner-up. We got a rematch of the championship with Lightning Rod and El Toro in the semifinals this year. So one of those 2 rides will be getting knocked out prior to the championship. And then you throw Mystic Timbers in there, a complete unknown, going up against Voyage. Well, what are your thoughts on these 2 matchups here that we're going to have to talk about next week?
I'll tell you what, you got to start asking yourself at this point, is Mystic Timbers that new Lightning Rod where that many people wrote it, that many people loved it? We saw Lightning Rod jump to number 1 in its first year. And I'll tell you what, walking out of Media Day, walking out of different events at Kings Island, there's a lot of people talking big things about Mystic Timbers. Personally, I don't think it's a number 1. When I rode Lightning Rod, I thought it was, but I think you got to start asking yourself the question of how high did Mystic Timbers go? And also, you might want to ask yourself the opposite question too: did Mystic Timbers get the benefit of a bracket that may not have been as strong as other brackets? So I don't know.
Well, and I think that's what you were trying to weigh here if you pick this matchup. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, Mystic Timbers is here in the Final Four, but as we said, part of the reason that we think it might be here is the fact that it didn't have any previous champions. It didn't have any of those long-time perennial heavy favorites in that region. Like we saw Voyage, El Toro, Lightning Rod, Outlaw Run, Boulder Dash, all those rides that have Rampage was top 5 last year, and Mystic Timbers beat that. So we know that Mystic Timbers has to be pretty high, but you didn't have, a former champion in there. So it's going to be real interesting to see if Mystic Timbers can keep it going or if it will meet an end here next week when it takes on Voyage in the Final Four. So obviously you're not surprised because this is the Final Four you predicted way back on the selection show.
No, not surprised at all, Danny Miller.
No, but I think this is a very good group.
People, like to criticize me for picking Kumba over Millennium Force last year. You may have noticed that the Lista Rabarchek is no longer here. I got rid of a bad gimmick, sent it off to Japan, had it right. It's going doing some stuff with jobbers now, and now you see what happens. I'm back in my game. I'm back in the zone. 4 for 4. Let's go to steel, which Danny Miller is my wheelhouse. I don't even like wood coasters, and I was still right.
Yeah, and you're not even a Beast fan, and you didn't pick the Beast.
No, those people.
All right, well, let's move on to the steel coasters now. Let's find out who is moving on to the Final Four. And as we talked about last week, I think the big storyline going into the steel bracket here is the fact that we've got 4 non-U.S. coasters on the left side of the bracket, and we've got 4 U.S. coasters on the right side of the bracket. So this is really kind of becoming an international war here because the non-U.S. folks are going to have a ride in the finals, and the U.S. folks are going to have a ride in the finals. And now it's time to kind of figure out which one is going to be which, and then ultimately they're going to go head to head here. We'll start with the Wardley region, and we've got Terran from Phantasialand in Germany going up against Helix from Liseberg in Sweden, and we see that Terran last year was number 38. Probably, not many people got to ride it. We did have a heavy German contingent last year, and this year voting. We had several European voters this year, which is, a credit to them for these 2 rides to be in the Elite 8 here. And, it's interesting because these 2 rides are very different in a lot of ways, but they're also very similar in a lot of ways. One is Intamin, one is Mock Rides. You've got multiple launches. One has inversions, one does not have inversions. the lap bars are very similar from what I've seen on both. You've got Terran, which is very, very heavily themed. Helix is kind of more of a location coaster. It doesn't maybe have so much of a theme per se as it does a really nice location on the side of the hill there, and really is kind of a terrain ride in many ways. So a lot of similarities between these two, but also a lot of differences. And I think one of the similarities is that neither you nor I have ridden either of these and really don't know a whole lot about either of these rides aside from what we've seen in videos.
Well, I think it's interesting that once again, I picked Terran to go to the Final Four here just to keep everyone updated on what my initial picks were. But luckily, when I started naming rides, I didn't have to pick all these other, matchups here. So I don't know if I would have come up with Helix on the other side of this matchup.
Yeah.
Because Smiler was a really strong choice. I think Medusa was a really strong choice, given what people have said about it. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know if Terran was going to get past Skyrush, which I thought was another really strong choice. So to get this matchup of Terran and Helix, I think is really impressive if you had that on your bracket. I still have to say, though, being that Terran placed so highly last year in its first year at 38, that's a strong showing for an international coaster that was brand new. That's a really strong showing.
Yeah.
I got to say that Helix did not place, that Terran has to move on.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up Skyrush, because Skyrush was the ride that in the selection show I thought a lot of people would gravitate to as their Final Four coaster, because as we'll get to in a few minutes, that Stengel region had so many of the heavy hitters and so, a couple of previous champions and so many previous Final Four coasters that there weren't enough to go around for all the regions, and this is the one that you kind of had to find one that you really liked to go to the Final Four. And you said that you thought the logic might be pick which ride of the 8 you think is most likely to go to the Final Four and kind of work backwards in this region, just because if you did it matchup by matchup, maybe you wouldn't come up with something that you liked. But I think in a way, if you kind of did it forwards, starting with the first matchups, maybe you were more likely to come up with this one as opposed to picking Skyrush from the go. So I'd really like to hear, maybe in the comments, I'd like to hear how folks went about picking this particular region, just because it was kind of so wide open at the beginning of the contest. So moving on to the Final Four from the Wardley region, it is Terran from Fantasialand, and look at Andrew Barczyk. He is 5'4", Here's Thrilling 32.
Boy!
How about that? Terran from Fantasialand. Moving on, and I know that one Drew the intern from In the Loop is very happy, as I know that is he got to ride that ride a year or two ago and was very, very pleased that it is one of his favorite rides. So Terran from Fantasialand. Moving on to the Final Four. What do you think of that? I mean, obviously you were right, but
I like it. Looking back, this was a tough choice to come out of this region. Mm-hmm. It's a tough choice. But I think Terran is going to be one of those rides that we're going to be talking about for the foreseeable future here in the Thrilling 32.
I think so. I think that's a very, very legitimate point there, and it's definitely one that we could be looking at for years to come as, a top 10 ride. I mean, almost surely a top 10 ride here after some of the rides that it's beaten. I would think it's almost definitely got to be in the top 10 there. And Helix too. Helix may very well end up being a top 10 ride as well when it's all said and done in a few weeks when we get to the final rankings.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's move on now to the Ron Toomer region. And we will have Leviathan from Canada's Wonderland, a former champion, going up against the defending champion, Expedition GeForce from Germany's Holiday Park. And, I love Leviathan. And I really love that ride. It's a fantastic ride. Haven't ridden Expedition GeForce yet, and because I haven't said it yet tonight, it is one that hopefully I will get to ride in 2019. That is on the itinerary. Got to throw that out there for Rob Dole and the like, who have been heckling me, offline about talking about that trip, which is coming up hopefully in a year or two here. But looking at the graphic here, history shows that Leviathan is trending the wrong way and Expedition GeForce has been trending the right way, which is why it was last year's champion. I don't see this one as a difficult one to pick.
I don't see this as a difficult pick to make here. And even looking at this overall region, I think you'd have to fool yourself into picking anything but Expedition GeForce here. That this matchup here is the most likely of the matchups for the Elite Eight. Unless you're a big fan of Goliath at over Georgia or Storm Chaser, if you have mental disturbances, this is probably the most likely of the matchups that you came up with. And I think Expedition GeForce is clearly the ride here, being that it won last year.
Yeah, I mean, in this region here, I mean, you had some really good rides. You had, Behemoth, Goliath, Mako. We can't speak for Schverdis Kiernan and the Goliath from Wallaby Holland, but you had some good rides in here. But you really didn't have more than one of those great, top 5 rides. Like, yes, that's the one rides. Leviathan at one time was one of those rides, but I think the time has, the Fury effect a little bit. I think the time has come and gone that Leviathan is a top 5 coaster.
I agree.
Maybe even top 10, 3 years ago, this is a different discussion because as we saw in that graphic 3 years ago, Leviathan was number 3 and Expedition GeForce was number 11. Even 2 years ago, Leviathan was 8 and Expedition GeForce was 5. Very, very close. Last year, not so much. And if you're going off the recent history, which has been a pretty good teacher in this tournament thus far, then I think you would be foolish to not pick Expedition GeForce here. I think you'd be holding on a little bit too much to sentiment at that point, I would think.
No, I agree. I agree with all of that. So I got to think Expedition GeForce is your pick here.
It is Expedition GeForce, the defending champion, moving on to the Final Four once again. I believe it's the 3rd consecutive year now we've seen Expedition GeForce in the Final Four, obviously last year being the champion. So we will see Terran going up against Expedition GeForce in the Final Four. 2 rides from Germany, 2 Intamin rides from Germany, oddly enough. It's an interesting matchup there. Absolutely.
I only picked the Final Four for a reason, Danny.
Yeah, well, and the similarities kind of end there because after that, those 2 rides are completely different types of rides in many, many, many ways. So we will definitely see next week which one of those 2 rides will be moving on to the championship. But Andy, this region, I think, in the 6 years that the Thrilling 32 has been going on, and, in the 4 years since we've brought it on to COASTER.net Uncut here, I really think the highlight of this tournament in the 4 years we've been doing this online and the 6 years that this tournament has been going on, the highlight thus far to this point has been the Werner Stengel region and the absolute massacre of brackets that has been taking place in this region. And not only the massacre of the brackets, but the massacre of all the damn good roller coasters that have met an untimely demise and an early exit here. Nemesis going out in the first round. X2 out in the first round. Millennium Force out in the first round. Superman the Ride, former champion, out in the second round. Iron Rattler, former Final Four coaster, out in the second round. And now we see Intimidator 305 from King's Dominion, a former champion, never not outside the top 3, going up against Maverick from Cedar Point last year, number 4 last year in the Final Four, and in the overall rankings, number 4. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. And you know what? We talked about this before.
It doesn't get any easier,
does it? It doesn't get any easier. And we talked about this before because, Rob Decker and Dick Kinzel, they said when they opened Intimidator 305, they said, we really married Maverick on the back end of the best lift hill we could build, which was essentially Millennium Force's lift hill. And they took the idea of Maverick, they supersized it, and put it on the back end of Millennium Force's lift hill. We've seen Maverick knock off Millennium Force. It was higher than it last year. It knocked it off head-to-head this year. And now it comes down to what's better, the real Maverick or the supersized Maverick? That's kind of what we're going up against here. And I honestly do not know which way it's going to go.
Well, I'll say this. If it was up to me, I think Maverick's the clear winner between these two rides. In my personal rankings, Maverick is the clear winner. There's something about I-305 that just never sat well with me. I was only
riding it the same day, but after Fury.
Yeah,
maybe?
and it's the only day I've ever ridden I-305 because previous trips to King's Dominion, the ride's been down or broken or something else. So it's only that one day. It was midsummer. It was hot. It should be giving the best ride possible, and something just didn't sit well. I thought it was an amazing ride. I'm not saying it wasn't an amazing ride, but we're not talking about amazing rides here, Danny Miller. We're talking about number one rides here.
Yeah.
And when I talk about I-305, nowhere in my mind does it ever cross that is a number one ride. And that's what I'm basing this on. That's my mind. Now, when I look at the enthusiast perspective overall, I see a very different perspective on that. There are quite a few people that say I-305 is indeed a number one ride. And I realize that my opinion is in the minority there, that you have the huge first drop. You have the twistings and the turnings and all this other stuff going on the back half. People say it's number one. Our poll has said it's number one. Our poll has said it's in the top three consistently. Maverick, not so much. Maverick, on the other side, has meandered in being a great coaster, but never a top coaster. Last year was the first year that we saw Maverick hit the top four. Do I think that it has enough to overtake I-305? I'll say this. I wouldn't be shocked, but I still think I-305 has the win.
And you know what? That's very good logic there. And I think that's why folks need to – I think people need to think like that when they're filling out these brackets, because at the end of the day, Maverick is trending in the right direction, but you could maybe say maybe last year was the fluke for Maverick. I don't know. I mean, the fact that it beat Millennium Force, I mean, it's still probably going to be very, very high.
One, right?
No, that's very true. So, again, you're thinking very logically here and kind of putting your own thoughts aside, which is what people need to do when they're, picking their brackets here. So, this was the region of death, if there ever was one, and we started 3 weeks ago when we started the results, and over a month ago when we let the selection show come out, and we talked about that whoever came out of this region was going to be torn and tattered and battered and bruised, and it was going to be quite a feat to come out of this region for sure. And whoever came out of this region would have a legitimate shot to win it all. And coming out of the Stengle region into the Final Four, it is Intimidator 305 from King's Dominion. And some people might be a little surprised by that. I think I'm a little surprised by that. But, Miller, you provided the perfect logic as to why we shouldn't be.
You shouldn't be surprised by this because, once again, we said at the very outset of this, I'm, of course, right once again, but we said at the outset that history is an indicator, and history has shown us, if you go back to the Ride Warrior Choice Awards from last year, Intimidator 305 was 3, Maverick was 4, Millennium Force was 5, Nemesis was 6. Those are Superman the Ride was 8, Iron Rattler was 9, X2 was 10. All these rides are in this region, Danny Miller, but guess what? What's changed? Nothing's changed on that list there. There should have been no real shocking developments here. That Iron Rattler beat Nemesis. Was that correct? Iron Rattler That was the only one.
That was the one. But again, with the big trip over that a lot of us took over to the UK, it's not surprising that Nemesis moved somewhere.
Yeah. So really, if looking at it now, when you see it completed, you might say, well, that should have been easy to do. And honestly, I can't disagree with that. That yes, this was the region of death. Yes, when you're looking at those first round matchups, you're like, what the hell's going on here? But now looking at the completed bracket, I think you got to look back and say, you know what, though? It makes sense.
Yeah, save Goliath from Laurent. Thanks for playing.
Yeah.
But congratulations on being number 32 and being put in the absolute worst region in the history of the tournament. But it goes to show you if you do your homework, you should be able to come out with a pretty good result. Maybe you slip up one or two, but at the end of the day, if you did your homework, you might have come out with everything correct there.
Absolutely.
All right, we've got 3 of our 4. Let's find out who the last one is. And I'll tell you what, Andy, you're 7 for 7. You might have 8 for 8.
And I'm looking pretty good right now.
You're looking pretty good because 8 for 8 is not much in doubt right now. You might have this one in the bag. Anton Schwarzkopf region, we've got Fury, 325 from Carowinds, the defending runner-up and the champion from 2 years ago, going up against Twisted Colossus from Six Flags Magic Mountain. Any chance that the West Coast fanboys have their way and, help pull off an upset?
You know what that is right there, Danny? That's called a goose egg from where I come from. And there is no chance that Twisted Colossus moves on here. Come on.
Well, I'm really surprised that because twice you've done it to me already, and I was thinking you were going to do it again there where I ask you a stupid question and you say, no. But you cared to elaborate this time, which I much appreciate. It is Fury 325 from Carowinds moving on to the Final Four once again. And there he goes. He puts on the crown. 8 for 8, Mr. Final Four himself.
8 for 8, baby!
Look at that. Oh, man.
Come on. I talk on that selection show for a reason, people. I gave you the answers. I told you what the test was. I told you what the answers were. All you had to do was finally believe in...
After 4 years, you might know what the hell you were talking about, because the first 3 years you certainly didn't.
Well, even a stop clock is right twice a day, Danny. That's,
Well, yeah, blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. As we take a look at the Final Four as voted from the 2017 Ride War Choice Awards, as you see, we've got the Battle of Germany. We've got Terran from Phantasialand going up against Expedition GeForce from Holiday Park. And we've got the Battle of the Cedar Fair Gigas in the southeast there, Intimidator 305 and Fury 325. The battle of the numbered roller coasters, oddly enough, once again. So there's your Final Four for the Steel as well. And, obviously you're not super surprised because, you predicted this way back on the selection show over a month ago. But at the end of the day here, we've got 8 fantastic roller coasters in the 2 Final Fours this year. It seems like every year there's 1 or 2 that either maybe you're not happy with or maybe I'm not happy with. At the end of the day, I'm not the biggest El Toro fan in the world, but at the end of the day, I know everyone else loves El Toro, and I understand why it's a top 5 coaster. It is a fantastic roller coaster. So I'll tell you what, we've got a very, very strong Final Four in both brackets this year.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's not going to be easy to determine who's going to win this. And I'll tell you what, it was hard to get to this point. It's even harder now to start picking rides. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. But who, at this point, Danny, why don't we go to see who's in the lead?
Yeah, let's go look at the standings. And again, as we talked about before, if you do, we'll put the standings up here, and please check your own scores against what we have, and let us know if you believe we've made a mistake. As we saw in the first round, there was a little bit of an error in the spreadsheet that I had created, and we did rectify that. We did have multiple people reach out and tell us that they did feel that we corrected the scoring issue. So hopefully we're all good to go there. Our leader in the clubhouse right now, Brandon Bargo, who has all 4 correct on both sides. And we've got lots of people who have all 4 correct in both wood and steel. So I'm just going to run down the sheet here. We do have Brandon Bargo had all of them right. Jonathan Pitt had all 4 right in both. Joseph had all 4 right in both. I think those are the only folks that had all 4 right in both. But we had plenty of people with 4 right in one and 3 in the other. Ted Adams, Mackenzie, Jeremy, Matthew K, Ian, Nick B, Jimmy, lots of people, Dave Hayner, Zach Page, Tyler Marley, all these people going down the top 25. And, it's hard to see here as we put the top 25 up there, but Maverick Rob, he moved up from number 29 to number 26 this week. So starting to make a little bit of headway, Maverick Rob there.
Blazing up that rate. Working
his way. Now, unfortunately, if he's going to continue that snail's pace in his climb, as my camera is going out to lunch here, if Maverick Rob is going to continue that snail's pace of a climb, he's going to need about 18 more rounds of this tournament to get up to number 1. So, Maverick Rob had the entire wood Final 4 correct, but only 2 of the steel ones correct. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that maybe, just maybe, Maverick Rob had Maverick in the Final 4 this season.
Quite possibly. Maybe not the best of picks.
And I'll tell you what, looking at that graphic of the top 25, of the entire top 25 there, 2 champions for each person. Of the 50 champions, only 2 knocked out. We had 1 person selecting Twisted Colossus and 1 person selecting Maverick as their steel champions. All of the top 25 with their wood champions still in it, several lightning rods, a couple of Voyages, and 1 El Toro. And then over on the steel side, aside from the 2 that have been knocked out, a lot of Furies and a good amount of Expedition GeForces here as well. But oddly enough, look at this. Nobody in the top 25 with Mystic Timbers as their champion. We do have a few farther down the list. But if Mystic Timbers pulls off the upset and wins the Wood Championship, this is wide open here all of a sudden. If Mystic Timbers knocks off Voyage, then all of a sudden we've got a lot of different possibilities when we get to the final round.
Well, I don't want to talk about that matchup this week.
I know you don't.
I don't think it's going to happen, but I'll save my thoughts on that one for next week.
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, if you do see any errors with your score, please reach out to myself or Andy, and we will double check everything. I've got everything in the spreadsheet right here. Hopefully it's all correct after we made that correction after the first round, and hopefully do go back and look again to make sure your first round score has been corrected as well, and it is correct against your records. And the other thing here is this is more of a future reference thing, but when you're making your picks and filling them out in the Google form, write your picks down or put them in a spreadsheet or something so you know who you picked, because we have a lot of people, not a lot of people, but some people who say they don't know who they picked. And, that's something you guys got to do when you fill out your brackets, because that's the only way you can check your own score against what we have. So, please do that, for future reference. Write down what you're picking, print out the bracket and write it in pencil first. That's something you said in the selection show. Yeah. Print out the bracket and write it in pencil first before you submit it. Take some time to do it correctly, because personally, I know a lot of the people who are up towards the top in the standings here did exactly that and took some time and wrote it down and did their homework, looked at the previous year's standings. It does make a difference. I promise you, it helps you do well in this challenge.
Well, yeah, that absolutely. And one final announcement before we go here. There are only a few Fridays left to get your set of posters, of Dark Vengeance and Heartline and Blue 2000. I should announce, I don't know if we've said this before, but the next set of posters will be of the Thrilling 32 champions, that we're going to have one for the wood, one for the steel, and then the park winner will get its own picture. We already know that that's the Cedar Point. That Cedar Point won Best Park in the Ride Warrior Choice Awards. So that one is already off to the printer, but we'll soon find out who the other 2 winners are, and those will be the new posters. But if you want these 3, that they will be going away March 11th. So you only have 2 Fridays here if you get paid on a Friday to order these prints. And I'm not sure if there's going to be some overlap. There might be some overlap if you want to save on shipping and put these both together. I think, as a courtesy to our fans out there, I think we'll find a way to try and get a little bit of overlap between these two sets of posters, so that if you want to order all 6 of them at once, that we could get a combined shipping rate for you there.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We teased that a couple weeks ago. We said it wasn't a coincidence that the new set was coming out just after the conclusion of the Thrilling 32. So you will have a Cedar Point theme. We're not going to reveal exactly what it is, but we will have a Cedar Point themed poster, and then we will have the Wood Champion and the Steel Champion as the featured rides in the next set. And like you said, we'll probably have a little bit of overlap for those of you who have considered buying but haven't bought them just yet. We'll give you maybe a week or two of overlap. So if you do want to get both sets of 3 each, then you could get all 6 and maybe save on shipping a little bit. So I think that's something we can do for the folks out there. They're great products. They are great products. They look great. Andy, you did a lot of the legwork with that. We've sorted through some of our photos and some, of our archived photos, and so we've picked out some photos, from other sources as well that we are allowed to use, so we could, make some, to think about, down the pipeline of what we're going to do. We've thought about having some European themed ones, since we know more folks over there who are helping us out. And since myself, I've been over there now, and we thought about doing some different, chain themed ones, different park themed ones, even with like different colors of rides and stuff. We're thinking of all these different things that we want to do. Hopefully you guys are enjoying those, and hopefully you guys get yours before the opportunity goes away. So, before we sign off for this week, do we have any final thoughts from the bracket king over there?
I'll tell you what, I think from this point forward, you have to take what I say seriously on that selection show. Maybe in the past you haven't. Maybe you're like, this guy's a lunatic.
Well, hold on. You still might be a lunatic, but I think you still have to take what you say seriously at this point.
8 for 8, baby. I'm excited, though. So, as always, thank you for joining us here on COASTER.net and the Thrilling 32. I'm, of course, Andrew Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
And as always, Ride on, Ride Warriors.
See you next time, guys.